Morning guys, Andrea here from AC Podiatry. How are we this morning? You notice I guess I'm dressed up a little bit differently today. I've got my Adelaide United gear on. For those of you that don't know, I'm also the podiatrist for the Adelaide United women's A-League side, and that's where I was this morning, hence why I'm in the gear. But the reason for me shooting this today is around football, a big love of mine, because aside from being the podiatrist at Adelaide United and being a footballer myself, I'm also the director of women's football at Campbelltown City. And one of the things that we've spoken about at length at our club is around boots, specifically for the junior girls, but obviously for all players. And what I thought I would do today is shoot a video to give you guys a little bit of information, some education, and maybe a few tips on what to look for when purchasing boots. Now, please understand and appreciate this is not a you should be buying this boot over another boot, okay? I've been around football and footballers for a very long time, and picking a boot is a very personal choice. So I would never dare to sit here and tell a person what they should or shouldn't be wearing, okay? The primary consideration when buying a boot is obviously and always comfort. So there's no point me giving you advice around you should be buying this boot if you put it on and it feels absolutely horrible and is going to detract from you as a footballer. And we do know there's a direct correlation between comfort and injury. So if you're wearing a shoe that's uncomfortable, you're actually more likely to get injured. And that's actually the only correlation at this point around footwear and injury. So really important to take that on board as we go forward. So I'm not going to tell you this is the boot you should be buying or this is the boot you shouldn't be buying. Now, again, as I mentioned at the outset, this is going to be targeted towards specifically our junior girls at Campbelltown City and for the junior girls that I work with in clinic. But this can be used for boys as well. Just a couple of other considerations to take into account specifically with teenage girls. So I guess the first point I want to raise is that we've seen a real change in the kind of quality of surfaces and the types of surfaces that the girls and boys and junior players and senior players for that matter are playing on. Historically, it's always been on grass, and I'm old enough to remember when we played in mud pits. That's no longer the case, with most players playing on artificial surfaces, a massive increase in the number of artificial surfaces around the place, and good quality grass pitches. It's now at the point where if a pitch is too boggy or too heavy, referees will generally call the game off. And the reason I raise that point is there are effectively three types of boots that you can purchase. I've got a couple here. So the first type of boot we're talking about is an AG or an artificial ground boot. Okay, so this is a boot that's designed to be used on artificial ground. I'll get to the reasons as to why and what to look for, but this is the first piece. Okay, this is a artificial boot. You then have your firm ground boots, okay, which are a little bit different. You'll notice a subtle stud layout difference, which again I'll get to a little bit later in the video. The third one I don't have, it's a soft ground boot, and the soft ground boots, for those of you like me who are old enough to play and remember playing in those mud pits, they have a smaller number of studs, longer, deeper to kind of grab into the ground. Now, the reality is here in Australia, there's very little need for those kind of boots anymore. They're hard to purchase, they're hard to get in store for the reason that the trade-off just isn't there. So for the purpose of this discussion today, I'm not going to be talking about soft ground boots. If you do happen to be finding yourself playing in really heavy grounds, or look, if you're a professional footballer and they're watering down the surfaces and you can get away and you want that little bit of extra grip, then sure. But for today, we're going to kind of keep it to what most footballers are going to be wearing here in Australia, and that is either the AG or the firm ground boot. Now, one of the questions I get asked, Andrea, what's the fundamental difference between an AG and a firm ground boot, and do I actually need to be wearing a couple of different boots? Look, the major difference between a firm ground and an AG boot is effectively the stud layout and the stud pattern, okay? So if we look again at the AG boot, what you'll notice is a couple of things. First of all, the studs are very short, okay? There's not a lot of depth to these studs, okay? The second thing you'll notice is that they're hollow, all right? So the reason you've got the hollow boots or the hollow studs is to help with regards to one, the little green balls and things that sit within in the ground, but also the second thing is heat disbursement. Because artificials, especially in summer and the warmer months, can get quite hot, this allows for the heat the studs not to warm up and to allow for that disbursement of the heat. Okay, if we look at a firm ground boot, what we'll notice here is that the studs are longer. Okay, there's fewer of them. We've got these, in some of the boots, you'll have these blade type layouts, okay? Now, the reason for this is better grip. So the grass is firm, it sinks in and holds the ground a little bit better. Now, a lot of people say to me, oh, Andrea, can I use a firm ground boot on an artificial surface? You can, but it's not something that I would advocate and recommend. And the reason for that is quite simply this. The grip coefficient, i.e. the stickiness of this on an artificial surface, is significantly greater than this one, okay? And people might say, well, don't you want that? Don't you want a little bit more grip? Yes, but no. If we use our anecdotal, and again, there's no evidence that bears this out, so please understand this is my anecdotal experience. I'm involved with women's football. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I've had 4 or 5 ACL injuries on artificial surfaces. Each one of those girls has been wearing a firm ground boot on an artificial surface. And what's effectively happened is the foot has stuck when they've gone to change direction, and the rest of the body has gone forward. And they've been really, I don't want to use the novel, but the ACL has been kind of almost sheared. So the femur or the thigh bone has kind of come forward as the foot's stuck and the momentum's carried it forward. So all of the rest of the joint is perfectly okay, but we've kind of grabbed and moved forward. And so this is anecdotal, okay? In addition, those players that seem to have a little bit more concern with foot pain and foot discomfort, blistering, those type of things, and blisters are the #1 issue we see in football, are wearing firm ground boots in or on artificial surfaces. So my strong recommendation is to have 2 boots, okay? Have an artificial surfaced boot for AG surfaces and then a firm ground boot for the firm ground. Now, people say, okay, Andrea, but that's pretty expensive. And 100%, I can wholeheartedly agree with that. With boots retailing from anywhere from $180, $200 up to $350, $400, it can become really quite expensive, and I understand that. So if you are in a position where your child is playing on both artificial and firm ground boots, like my daughter does, and we have a boot for firm ground and a boot for artificial. But if you aren't in a position to purchase 2 and you're looking for something that might be able to work across both, the main point I would suggest and sit there is looking for boots that have a much shorter stud length, okay? So if you research shoes online or boots online, they will generally tell you what the stud length is on a boot. And I would be looking for, realistically, the lowest you can possibly get, 8, 10, 11 mil, not 12, 13, 14s, which some of them can have, okay? The shorter the stud layout, and look for more spherical rather than wedge-shaped studs, okay? Because that's just going to allow for a little bit more slip on the artificial. You'll sacrifice grip on the firm ground, but on the artificial, it will be significantly better. So again, that's something significantly important to think about. And if I use my own experience, even with my daughter, who always wore firm ground boots, got into a program where she was on and playing on artificials all the time, was getting significant foot pains, foot soreness. The shifts to AGs made all the difference. And if you talk to most players and footballers who've gone from a firm ground to an AG boot, they will all tell you the same thing. So something to be really, really mindful of, especially in pre-season, although I must admit we're not having the hottest weather, but the warmer the ambient temperature, the stickier the artificial gets, okay? And that's just something to be mindful of as well, that in hot weather, the stickiness of the boot increases, okay? So that's the first thing I want to kind of point to, is the outsole and thinking about getting a couple pairs of boots. The second thing I want to talk to is the actual construction of the boot. Reality is most boots are constructed very much the same. They're all kind of dead flat. I've got Nikes here, and this is the Tiempo. Most brands will have almost 2 or 3 models in their range. So if we use Nike as an example, the Tiempo sits in the middle. You have the Mercurial, which is the narrower boot, and then you have the Phantom, which this year has now gone to the wider boot. So again, within a brand, there are different models, and so it's really important for you to go and get fitted. And if I use the Phantom as an example, last year the Phantom for Nike was a very narrow boot. This year it's actually the widest boot of the 3. So if you're used to buying things online, because that's what you normally would do when you go and buy a Phantom online, because last year you wore a Phantom, you'll be disappointed this year because it'll be slopping around. So I am a really big fan of getting fitted and making sure that the shoe fits and does what it needs to do. The only final point I'm going to add today, because I don't want to be talking too long, okay? Kangaroo leather, synthetic, doesn't matter. Kangaroo will stretch a little bit more, okay? The overall construct isn't that important, in my opinion. The one piece, though, that I need to kind of express is for those kids around about the ages of 9, 10 through to about 12, 13, or people who have a history of Achilles or calf problems, okay? And I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, but you'll see here that this boot is dead flat, and most boots are dead flat, okay? And if I put my foot in that, the heel's going to drop and it's going to create a stretch on my Achilles, okay? So if this is my foot and it's dead flat, the Achilles runs up the back. The lower my heel falls relative to the rest of the foot, the greater the stretch on the Achilles. So if you're someone who's having heel pain or Achilles soreness wearing your boots, you might need to look for a subtle difference or a subtle change. And there are boots on the market that have a raise through here, okay? A roughly 10 mil raise, similar to what you would find in a sneaker. The brand that's readily accessible in Australia that does that is Asics, and you can purchase them online and in most stores, okay? So they are all over the place, but Asics do have that 10 mil wedge. Now, the importance of that wedge is purely to take stress off the heels and off the Achilles. So if you are someone who's experiencing Achilles pain or Achilles soreness or in kids heel pain, you may find that going to a shoe with a high drop is better than going to a shoe with a dead drop shoe, okay, or a dead flat sole, all right? So look, I'm at 12 minutes. I don't want to make it too long, but just to summarize the key points, okay? If you are playing a significant amount of games or training time on artificial grounds, please try and get yourself an artificial boot. Now, they are difficult, okay? This is Ali's boot. I had to get it from South Korea. It does take a long time to find them, especially because obviously we're in the middle of the season in Europe, and that's obviously big markets in North America, Asia, and Europe. It may get a little bit easier as we get closer to the start of the season, but please remember that these are the keys. So looking for an AG boot and then going for a firm ground. If you can't afford to do both, then my suggestion would be go firm ground, but go narrow. Now, you can use artificial on firm ground. Okay, you can, but you might find that it just becomes a little bit slipperier as the ground breaks down if we get a little bit of rain. So a very short studded firm ground boot may be preferential if you've got to go the one boot, but ideally go the two. And then if you've got some kind of heel pain or heel problem, go for something that's got a little bit of a drop, okay? And just my ninja tip, okay? Wearing a shoe that's super tight doesn't make you a better footballer, okay? And if you're suffering with ingrown toenails or cramping in the feet or having foot pain, sacrificing, your feel for how your foot feels for how a boot looks or how, a mentor or someone that you look up to wears a super tight boot so you think that's smart, it's not. Okay, if your foot is hanging over the sides of the boot, you lose stability. We play a sport that is multi-directional, okay? And if you're hanging over the edge of that boot and changing direction, you're not going to get stability, and that will increase your risk of injury, okay? So again, just because Mbappe wears a shoe or Haaland wears a shoe or Messi wears a shoe, that shouldn't be a reason as to why you should wear that shoe, okay? And kids, I'm speaking to you because I know how you look up to these guys and girls. Sam Kerr for the Mercurial, but please Get what works for you, feels most comfortable, and is going to prevent your injuries. Okay. If this has helped, like it. If you've share it. If you've got any questions, please reach out to me directly. I love football. I love helping people. The more I can do for you, the better it will be. All right. So go well. I'm going to keep moving. Take care. Talk soon. All righty. Ciao.